Okay guys, so what we're going to go over in this video is the lunge. Alright, so again, you have your 7 basic movements: squat, hip hinge, push, pull, press, carry, and lunge. So the lunge is kind of a hybrid of a hip hinge movement that we covered already and a squat movement that we covered already. So there are a few different ways to actually perform a lunge. There's reverse lunges, there's your standard walking lunges, there's static lunges, there's split squats, which is a type of way to do a lunge as well. They all follow the same basic principles, however. Now there are a few differences depending on what muscle group you want to hit. So if you want more quad focused movements, you want to have more movement at the knee and less movement at the hip. If you want more glute and hamstring focused movements, you're going to have more movement at the hip and less movement at the knee. So whenever you're performing an exercise, always try and think about what muscle you're trying to train. And the muscle you're trying to train or focus on will usually have an insertion point around that joint. So if we're doing a lunge, so I'm just going to turn to the side and do like a split squat here, for example. I would usually have my foot elevated on, say, this, for example. All right, so we'll just do it like this. Now, if I want more movement, or I want to focus more on my quads, now I'm going to have more movement at the knee. All right, because the insertion points for your quads are around the knee. If you want to have more, focus on the hip, then the insertion points for your glutes, or more focus on the glutes, your insertion points at the hip. Okay. Now, how do I do that? So it's easy for me saying this, but it's actually I need to show you how to do it. So if I bring my foot closer to myself and keep it a bit narrower, then there's going to be more movement at the knee. You can see my knee move forward. This is moving slightly in the background, but you can get what I mean. Okay, so you'll see my knee move forward. That's putting a lot more stress and a lot more tension on the quad than it is in the hip. Okay, so you'll see that. Now, if I want to put more focus on my glutes, I'll step out a bit. Don't have to step too far. Okay, now instead of driving the knee forward, I'll drive my hip back. So I've stepped out a bit further, so that's actually going to put more of a stretch on my hamstrings, and as I step back, you can see that. So rather than driving my knee forward, I'm driving my hip back. So my knee's actually not traveling forward anymore, but I'm putting all this weight onto my hip, which is putting more tension on my glute. Okay? So in terms of a lunge, same idea. If I want to be more quad focused, I'm going to take shorter, narrower strides compared to longer, wider strides for ham and glute focused lunges. So ham and glute focused lunges. Now, keep this in mind. Don't keep a narrow base because you're going to lose your balance. So I would always step out to the side a bit. Helps you keep your balance. Okay. So long, wide stride. It's more hams and glutes. All right. Short, narrow stride. More quads, because there's more movement around the knee. Alright, so always keep those in mind when you're performing these sort of movements. Now, some of you doing these will have better balance than others. So what you can do is when you do lunge, step. Take a second and lunge again. Step. Alright? So sometimes if you're lunging, you don't want to be using momentum. Then you're stepping, use momentum and stepping forward. You don't want to be doing that. You want to get muscle strong, not movement strong. If you're using momentum to push you forward, your muscle's not doing the work. If your muscle's not doing the work, you're not going to see any changes. So take your time doing these movements. So even if you are quite advanced with your training, sometimes it is good just to lunge, step, wait, lunge, step. There's nothing wrong with doing that, so keep that in mind. So basic take homes: more movement at the knee, more quad focused. More movement at the hip, more glute and ham focused. Okay? Don't keep your stance too narrow or you're going to lose balance. And lastly, don't be afraid to take that step so you don't lose your balance or don't end up relying on momentum rather than your muscle to do the movement.